Hey, God bless you. Welcome to Missions 102, Practical Issues in Missions Part 2. And in this first session, we are going to talk about the global need for the gospel. And we're going to have a lot of statistics. We'd like for you to write them down. You have a handout that you'll be available to download and to follow along in the guide. And these are some really alarming statistics that when we did this video, we prepared this material that we gleaned off of the Joshua Project and other websites like that. And these are some alarming statistics that will challenge your heart to show you and I the need for the gospel in this generation. You know, Matthew, Jesus said that once the gospel went across the nations, then the end will come, the Son of Man will return. And so we sure have that as a motivation. It sure is nice to know that we are co-laborers with Christ to be able to accomplish that. But right now, in the midst of this generation, we have work to do. The global need for the gospel. So let's look at it. There is 16,464 people groups. Listen to that. 16,464 people groups throughout the world. That's unreached people groups. Out of those 16,000, the unreached people groups are 6,659. A percentage of those unreached people groups is 40.4%. 40% of all the people groups throughout the whole world are considered unreached. That's alarming. That's alarming. The population in the unreached is 3.06 billion. The total population of all the world is 7.29 billion people. That's a lot. There's 42% of the total population, 42% is considered unreached. That's never heard the gospel, does not have a Bible in their language, has never even heard possibly the name of Jesus, considered unreached. 42%. Wow. Listen to this. 90% of missionaries go to Christianize people groups. Out of 100 missionaries, only 2 go to live amongst the far unreached people groups. So out of every 100, only 2 will go to these unreached people groups. Pretty alarming. Out of every $100 that is given towards missions, only 2 cents goes to reach these unreached people groups. If you was to just take a moment to name off the 3.06 billion people that are lost, that are unreached, if you were just to take a moment and say their names, it would take you 200 years of simultaneously saying their name. But yet the church, the global church, the local church, missionary organizations called missionaries, schools, seminaries, Bible colleges, all these resources like never before throughout any generation, there's still a heavy burden for the gospel message to make it across the globe. 42% we're not talking about unsaved. 42% of 7,290,000,000. 42% has never even heard the name that's above every name. The name of Jesus. Let that soak in for a moment. We talked about some alarming statistics about the unreached people group in this current generation. And we're going to look at the Apostle Paul, and we're going to look at what motivated him to continue to bring the gospel message to the nations. In Romans chapter 15, verses 20 and 21, it says, "And thus I aspired to preach the gospel not where Christ has already named, so that I would not build on another man's foundation. But as it is written, they who had no news of him shall see, and they who have not heard shall understand." Paul was motivated by Scripture's promise. This is awesome. He was motivated by Scripture's promise to bring the gospel to the nations. And he was motivated, what motivated him, he had a deep burden, number one. He had a deep burden to bring the gospel to the unreached, to those who've never heard the gospel. That's pretty powerful. But see, it was more than just this deep burden within inside of him. He had a desire to preach Christ to those who have never heard, is what motivated him. It was the motivation of his life. And so I would like to ask you, even now, what motivates you? What motivates you to take these courses? What's motivating you to desire to be on the mission field? What's motivating you at this moment to continue to pursue the things of Christ for your life? Why are you enrolled in West Coast Bible College and Seminary? Why are you in this course? Why are you desiring to take the gospel to the nations? What is your motivation? And so when we ask these questions, we see that Paul answered them in his own life. Paul says that it was my motivation to bring the gospel to the unreached, because Paul knew that to bring a fresh, clear gospel to the unreached was to ensure a fresh, unreligious tainting of life in a form of worship. How many of y'all know that worship and a lifestyle of tradition can be tainted by prior missionaries? Working behind missionaries that have already come and established churches, has already come and preached the gospel, has really caused a lot of problems, because missionaries have a tendency to teach preference and tradition as if it's the gospel truth. And so when someone comes and they hear this tradition or this preference that the nationals are holding or clinging on to, and they start saying, no, it's start defending it as if it's the gospel truth, because the missionary that came to bring them the gospel taught it to them like it was the gospel truth. But see, we don't have time to argue and bicker out of what to wear on a Sunday morning. We don't have time to argue and bicker and fight about what kind of instruments we should or should not have within a Sunday morning service. See, we need to be about the gospel. It's got to be our motivation to bring the gospel to where people's never heard it. We're not going to argue about what color to paint the church, or what color to have the tile or the carpet within the church, whether or not to have it on a Sunday night or a Sunday morning. There's no time for that. 42% out of 7.2 billion has never even heard of Jesus, and we have Jesus's people that are arguing, fighting. And Paul says, that's not my motivation. My motivation is to bring the gospel to those who never heard it. And within our ministries, we have to be motivated to know that the gospel in this generation the globe is in desperate need of it. We need to have we either need to go towards these unreached people groups, or our ministries within these Christianized areas or groups needs to be centered on sending some to go to these places. Either we go ourselves, or we're training and teaching nationals for them to go and to be a part of it. That is our call. So we talked about the global need for the gospel. We talked about Paul's motivation to bring the gospel to the unreached peoples. And I just want to take a moment to kind of share with you how we're doing it. And not that we're correct, but just the Lord has showed it to us. In a nation that's closed, in a nation where the foreigner is paid attention to at a high level, no matter where we go, no matter what we do, we're watched. And so it's difficult for me to go to these 53 different people groups that just about half of them have never even heard of Jesus. But you know what God has done in our heart, in our life? God has opened up opportunity to be able to train church planters, pastors, and leaders for them to go. Our aim has always been to help them to bring this gospel to these unreached, to these ones who has never heard it. For them to be able to take this gospel to the ends of the earth. See, I want to tell you that Jesus, this Messiah, he commanded us to take this gospel to all people groups. And this is so important for us in this generation. It's the mandate, and it should be our motivation, that there's 42% out of 7 billion people that have never even heard of Jesus. And yet there's so many on the mission field and back home that argue and fight and bicker about things that has no eternal value. May our hearts be always motivated to go where it's never been preached or proclaimed, and that we would cling on to the promises of God, that once this gospel reaches all people, then the end will come. God bless you.